All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was a nice sunny day compared to yesterday. It was a little chilly, so we're excited to have some sun today and on the first day of spring. Tonight's session is strategies to capitalize the farm, lessons from the field, and we have a really exciting group of farmers lined up tonight to share their experiences and how they started and built their farms over time using some grant and loan programs and other ingenuity that I'm sure they will share with us. This workshop is in a part of a series of investing in your farm, accessing grants and loans for growing your business. My name is Jennifer Hashley, and I'm the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project at Tufts, and we are based here in Eastern Massachusetts, and we'd love to know where other folks are coming from. So quick introductions and tech check. If you'd like to rename yourself on Zoom, there's a little icon above your photo there. You can rename yourself and add your pronouns. If you don't mind adding to the chat your name and your farm name, where you're located. And if you want to keep yourself muted throughout tonight's session, we'll allow everybody to ask questions during the Q&A. You can unmute yourself at that time, but just to cut down on background noise. And feel free as we go along this evening to add questions to the chat as well. Feel free to use that. We'll be monitoring that and making sure all of our speakers are, can hear the questions as well. We'll read those out loud. We are recording the session, so your video is optional, but definitely when we get to the question and answer, we'd love everybody to turn your video on so we can have a more intimate conversation with folks. So just a quick background on the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Our mission really is to improve our local and regional food systems by training the next generation of farmers. At heart, we're a beginning farmer training program and want to help anyone who is interested in starting a farm business to do so and to make sure that that food gets to all of us in our communities. And as I said, we're located here in Eastern Massachusetts in Beverly on the ancestral land of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts people. So our three program areas here at New Entry are our farmer training programs, our food hub, and our national capacity building initiatives. And within our training program, we have lots of courses and workshops like this, and we also run an incubator farm program. We are doing this workshop series. Our next session that we'll be doing is an Explore Farming workshop coming up in a couple weeks, and then we encourage anyone who'd like to get some hands-on learning. We're launching our crop production course. The first 8 weeks will be online starting in April, and then we'll have an in-person component as we move forward. And we also are currently looking at kind of revamping this on-farm learning practicum piece for a grant that we're working on right now. So we have a survey that we've been circulating around, and I'll drop that in the chat a little bit later if folks would like to weigh in and give us some input about how you'd like to see another kind of hands-on practicum learning experience designed. We're actively seeking that input right now. We also have our farm business planning course that are offered in the fall and winter, which just wrapped up for the winter season. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned for our fall session. And then you can find a virtual tour of our program on our YouTube channel, where you can also find the recording of tonight's session and all the other workshop sessions later on. As I mentioned, we run a food hub, we run a CSA, do some food access work, and also have other market-based trainings. Later on this spring, we'll probably be hosting another Produce Safety Alliance training with UMass, so stay tuned for that. And our national and regional programs help provide other professional development support for other beginning farmer programs across the country. So that's a little bit about New Entry. As I mentioned, this workshop tonight is part of a larger series that was basically requested by a lot of farmers in our network, wanted to learn more about grant writing, how do you find money to start your farm? So we've been doing this workshop series for a few months now, and have a lot of great farmer speakers on each session to talk along with the agencies and share information about the grant and loan and cost share programs available to help you establish your business. So if you missed any of those, again, you can check those out on our YouTube channel. All of the workshops, recordings, fact sheets that we've developed as follow-ups to those workshops, and the decision tool that we're working on will all be posted here on our website. You go on to the top of our thing to the resource tab and drop down to the Farmer Resource Library. There's another side tab called Accessing Grants and Loans. So that's where you'll find all the project information from this particular workshop series. And I wanted to also put in a plug, MDAR, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resource, tomorrow night is having another grant writing webinar, and they're going to be covering all the different funding opportunities that are currently available right now. So the Food Safety Improvement Program, the Climate Smart for Ag program, and some of the farm viability programs. And we have tonight, Jessica Camp is online. So if any of you have any questions about MEGA, if that comes up, she's also here online tonight. And they'll be talking about all the MDAR programs again tomorrow night as well. So check that out. And if you didn't know already, MDAR has put together this cool little ArcGIS story map. And I'll drop a link to this in the chat, as well as the registration form for the other workshop when I'm done speaking. You can check out this story map, and also, in addition to the wonderful speakers we have tonight, you can learn about other farmers who've taken advantage of these other programs throughout the state, and some more information about the programs. So as part of this series, Kimberly is going to launch the poll for tonight's workshop. This is a free workshop series. Again, it's sponsored by the Northeast Risk Management Education Program, and they are really interested in making sure that farmers are gaining knowledge as a result of these workshops. So we'd love to, if you don't mind, filling out these few little questions about your knowledge before the workshop starts, and we'll ask you again the same questions as you exit. So we really appreciate your help with the work, the polls and evaluations that we will also be sending as a follow-up to this series. Thanks for filling that out. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the speakers for tonight's session. I think this is going to be really awesome, and I can't wait to hear from everyone. It's always so nice to hear from farmers about how they've really made what is a really challenging prospect of finding resources and sustaining and capitalizing your farm business. And some of the farmers that graduate from New Entry are doing it from scratch. You know, a lot of times the land that you can find is just that, raw land. And if you need to expand, sometimes you can just find raw land, but that does not make a farm until there's all the infrastructure that goes along with it. And as we know, that can be quite expensive. So how do you put it all together? So tonight we're going to hear from Mohammed Hannan, who is a recent New Entry graduate who almost was the poster child for this project that we're taking on, which is really how to been trying to figure out how to support and help Mohammed start his farm from scratch. So after leaving New Entry, he started Hannan Healthy Foods in Lincoln on some town-owned leased land with his family, and he's been growing year over year ever since. So super excited to have Mohammed share his experience with us. And then we'll be joined by David Dumaresque, who grew up farming in Dracut, and he was also a Peace Corps volunteer, as I was, in Ecuador, and was helping farmers there. And he came back to the US and continued farming, and was able to actually buy his own farm, and has really done a lot of great work at farmers markets and CSAs. And, you know, just, I love talking to Dave and hearing all of his latest challenges and solutions as he continues to grow and expand his farm business. And then next, oops, I move my cursor here. We'll be joined by Willie Crosby, co-founder of Fungi Alley out in Hadley, and he's the mushroom guy, and has also watched him grow over the years as well, and began his mushroom journey in 2013, and has been also sharing his knowledge with farmers across the state as he's grown his business. So we'll hear how he started and expanded over time. And then we'll be joined by Ellie Vaughn, who's the owner and operator of Phoenix Fruit Farm in Belchertown. She began at Phoenix as a manager, and then was able to purchase the property from the former owners in 2017. She also joined us for an earlier workshop sharing her experience with crop insurance. So we'll hear about how she's been able to grow and expand her farm. And then last but not least, we'll be joined by Kat Chang Lasnica and Peter Reed Lasnica, who own and operate Reed Farm in Sunderland, Mass, which is a small-scale poultry processing facility and poultry farm. And so they've been in business since 2019 and have gotten some funding to help expand their operations. And I met Peter long ago at the New England Small Farm Institute as we were working on our mobile poultry processing unit. So I'm glad he's been able to turn that vision into an on-site facility at long last through a lot of hard work. So super excited to hear from all of the farmers about how they've grown and started their operations and sustained them over time, and taken advantage of grants and loans and creative financing and all kinds of other things that we'll hear about tonight. And thanks again to our funder for supporting this workshop series, again, the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Program, and through which is a program of USDA. So we're grateful to them for making this possible, and to the farmers and to all of you for attending. So that's it for me. I will stop sharing and turn it over to Mohammed, and you can get us started.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let me share my slides. Can everyone see my slides? Let's see. Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Kim, for organizing such a wonderful workshop. My name is Mohammed Hannan. I am from Hannan Healthy Foods farm. It's a certified organic operation that I started in 2018 as an incubator farmer at New Entry at Dracoat. Then we moved to Beverly in 2019 and 2020. And finally, I moved to Lincoln on a 2.5 acre operation without any infrastructure. And until now, I'm a weekend farmer, so it's a bit of a journey of a weekend farmer, small story. On the right, you're seeing this is the new field that I got from the town of Lincoln in 2020. It's a 2.5 acre operation next to Hanscom Airport on Route 2A. This is a short slide on how I have progressed doing my weekend farming, starting on a quarter acre in 2018, half acre in Beverly, 2019 to 2020. At the same time, I got the land from Lincoln, 2.5 acre that I was basically running back and forth Beverly and Lincoln at the same time. So it was not fun, but we made it through. 2021 to 2023, now I'm working on 10 acre operation. Those are the field map that you are looking on the left. It is on Route 117 in Lincoln, next to basically Codman Community Farm. It's the whole block. It's almost 7 acre, the whole area. And on the right, this is Ritchie Field next to Hanscom Drive. So none of the field has infrastructure. So one of the reasons I am here to talk about is how I started without really basic farm infrastructure that we need to run the operation, day-to-day operation. So before going to that, what we grow is basically, it's a certified organic operation. I grow mostly all the stuff that we find here, from lettuce to eggplants, whatnot. Additionally, I try to grow some Southeast Asian veggies that where I am from, I used to like a lot during my childhood. So I wanted to bring that memory back and to see if people from here, they also like it. What I found is they really like some of the crops that I grow. And those are some of the crops I grow on a regular basis. Every single year, I try to grow a bit here and there. Based on today's talk, I would like to focus on some of the infrastructure, how I started, where I got the funding, about the land access, and overall the logistic challenge. The land that I am working on, it is Lincoln Town Conservation Land, the whole 10 acres. And when I started, the land did not have any address on the property. So it was very difficult for me to even get the shipment to the property. So it took some time to get the address from the town after long struggle, but we made it. In one of the fields where I started, the only infrastructure we had is one pond and a small little hoop house. So irrigation from the pond and a hoop house. So my first idea was to see how can I really fund all the infrastructure that I needed. So I started reaching out to USDA, Natural Resource Conservation Services, FSA, Farm Service Agencies, to see if I can get loan and what funding options they have available. I also started, taking courses, looking for free grants that does not need any security money or reimbursement money. So I got my funding for my greenhouse, high tunnel, the solar panel that you are looking at, solar panel, all those funding through USDA, NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Services. Only trouble was for me that funding was reimbursement grant. So basically, you have to spend money to get the money. So make sure that you guys have the money to fund. So what I did at that point, I did not have money to get the funding. So what I did is I reached out to FSA to see if I can get a loan to bridge that gap. So my goal was I'll get the loan from FSA. I'm getting the promise that I can get the fund from USDA, but I wanted to see if I can match those together. And luckily it did. I got the loan, I got the promise from the NRCS, and I started the project. I spent some money and I got the loan, and that worked really, really well. At the end, I saw that it is not enough to finish my greenhouse, my personal greenhouse, washing stand, and some few small equipment, to buy small equipment. So I reached out to FSA for a grant that's called Mega Grant, Matching Enterprise Grants for Agriculture. I found it really, really interesting that you can take as a case study. That grant was small, $10,000 grant. It's matching, so you can get up to $20,000. Luckily, I got all $20,000, so that was really, really big help. One of the interesting thing about that grant was you really don't need to buy new equipment. Some of the grant funding that is mandatory that you have to buy, new infrastructure, new equipment, or new tractor. So that was very flexible. So I was able to work with like some grant writing help and basically business program development help within the project. So that was really helpful. So they helped me how to, write a business plan, how to write a business plan to submit to the organization. So that was really helpful. And I was able to craft my all different pieces. It does not have to be in one project. You can basically find, mix and match all your different needs. And if you can, put together a project within your, let's say 20,000, that is really possible. And the person who I worked with during this time, it was really, really great. She visited the field. I felt it was one of the simple, based on our time, it was really simple project that one can get really easily to help their funding and resource need. Then I can talk about some other logistic challenge that you might everyone face in the farming sector. I still don't have any storage situation. I cannot store my winter squashes, melons, anything, tomatoes in that farm. I don't have, vehicles, delivery vehicles. So these are my two farm truck basically that I use on a regular basis. I tried few other funds, FC grant, that is infrastructure security grant, that didn't come through. I got few other small grants from American Farmland Trust to buy this small BCS. That was my first farm tractor, big tractor. So that was interesting. That was also very easy to get. It is small grant, $5,000, but I think someone can get it really easy. Then I would like to share a little bit how how do we do our marketing. I sell all my produce mostly through the CSA. I have some restaurants account and also sell to Food Hub. And I have a small farm stand. It is a pop-up tent that I start in front of the farm. So that is how I basically sell my produce. And recently, those are few of the new addition to our farm. It was a quite big challenge when I knew that I didn't get the funding from APSIG, and the timing was not working to write any other grants to get my farm tractor. I tried, but timing was a big issue. Some of the funding, you really need to, plan accordingly. How do you stagger all your infrastructure and priorities? That might be really interesting. How do you, what works for you? I just got a tractor. It was my own funding. And still there are many things needed to make it successful or to become a full-time farmer. As I said at the beginning, I have a full-time job. I work all weekends, early mornings, evenings, who knows. But it's really hard. I am trying to, get in a situation where I can only, run my family as doing one thing. And so one thing, farming. So I'm not sure how much time I have, but I would like to stop here. And if people has any questions that I can answer, I think that will be helpful rather than, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Yeah, you are an inspiration. So appreciate you sharing your information, and we'll circle back to you with questions as we move to the next speakers as well. So thank you. Thanks for all your hard work. So next up is Dave Dumaresque. You can share next.
Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. So you don't have to look at the slide just yet. I didn't create too many slides. I just made a couple of bar graphs. So when I started farming, well, as Jennifer mentioned, I grew up working on local farms, even though my family were not in farming. And then when I got out of the Peace Corps in 1997, I immediately started farming full-time. So I was immediately a full-time farmer on my own, self-employed. And how did I do that? Well, when I got out of the Peace Corps, I was given a $5,000 readjustment allowance. I had about $5,000 of my own savings, and I got a $10,000 loan. And with that $20,000, I basically started farming. I've never really paid myself. So every year I keep putting almost all the money back into the business. The first many years I lived with my parents, so I didn't really have much for living costs. I wasn't married, didn't have a family. So again, you can imagine that in a sense, $20,000 to $40,000 every single year, I was able to reinvest back into the farm. And that really made all the difference. Also, because I love farming and I didn't have a family at the time, I could easily put in 100 hours a week and build up that sweat equity. Now that I'm married with kids, I can't imagine doing that. And now it's tough to work 65 or 70 hours a week. So how to start out in a different situation, I can't really say. One of my first big breaks, I would say, was in 1999. There was a failed apple crop, and I was growing apples on one of the farms that I rented, and that made me eligible for a $35,000 lower interest loan from the FSA. And with that, I bought my first 3 heated greenhouses. So if you look at the chart, you can see the bluish lines are greenhouses, heated and unheated. And so I put up my first one actually in 1998 with no heat. It was just an unheated high tunnel. And then in 1999, I put up 3 heated greenhouses. In 2000, I added a heater into another one, so then it was up to 4. And then you can see the growth of all the different greenhouses, where today we have over 2 acres of area covered. I think at least half of that now is heated. So over time, what I've tried to do is basically add length to the growing season and move my focus and sole income away from just the summer season. And I've been doing that by adding the greenhouses and also adding storage so that I can take that summer or fall harvest, store it, and be able to sell it in the winter months. I find that customers only eat so much per week. So the more weeks that I can feed them, the more income and sales that I have. So that's where the storage and the greenhouses really have made the world of difference over the years. You can see here in 2016, we added a packing building, basically my first ever packing building with nice modern refrigeration, and the amount of product that I could store skyrocketed to like 400,000 pounds between 2 rented farms and the home farm where I constructed that new facility on. And you can also see that I only own 1 farm. Well, now it's kind of 2 because I acquired the acreage behind me of 66 acres of conservation land last year. So I've always been growing on nearly 100 acres over the past 10 years or so. And you can see there's always been some fluctuation. I continue to rent and lease about 5 different parcels, including to the home farm. So it's been a slow, gradual growth. And one of the other secrets has always been to maintain liquidity. As Mohammed mentioned, a lot of the grants pay you back. So you have to have either a loan source or your own funds to start out with and then get reimbursed. So in a sense, I also always have a bucket list of investments and improvements to capital infrastructure that I'd like to make. And even now, I mean, there's $2 million worth of investments that I'd like to make in the farm. But farming is not that profitable. So you kind of have to look at your wish list and look at the grants available, see which grants you might apply for, think of which ones you might be more likely to be awarded, decide is the money that you might get out of that grant worthy of the time you're going to have to put into writing that grant, and then put your best foot forward and spend a day or 2 putting in the application. If you get awarded, okay, that item on the wish list is going to get done next year, and it's going to get done with those leveraged funds. So it's not going to cost, say, the $50,000 that you thought it was going to cost you. It's only going to cost you $10,000 or $20,000 because you get the grant money to cover the balance. Now you take those saved funds from the grant and you roll it into the next project and then into the next project. And that's how I've been able to build my business and create as much capital infrastructure that we do have. Do you want me to keep going, Jennifer?
I think that's great. Do you want to share your other slides, or are they more of the same kind of growth trajectory?
So the first slide is really the capital infrastructure. The second slide is more the sales, showing the growth in the number of farm stands and the number of farmers markets and the number of CSAs per week, and also the number of CSA weeks per year. So you can see that that's the kind of the lime green lines are the number of weeks per year. So even though the peak number of members during the season has fluctuated over the years, you can see the spike during COVID. What's almost more important, or just as important, is the number of weeks that we're able to provide the CSA. Now it's basically year round, but we do have, an every other week period in the winter, and that's why it's basically 46 weeks of the year and not 52. So all these sales have also obviously created, the capital, the funds for all these capital expenditures.
Great. And you've been able to maintain all your other markets and grow the farm stand and other things while you're growing all the weeks. That's impressive.
Correct. And it's always, I don't like to get rid of markets too quickly when they're underperforming, because sometimes things will change and then suddenly a market that wasn't very profitable can become profitable because of changes behind the scenes or beyond your means.
Great. And you had a third slide?
What was that? Oh, I was trying to get that data into the other slides, but it didn't fit very well. So it's kind of an outlier. I kind of combined the donated and wholesale pounds of annual sales and donations over the years, just to show that growth separate from retail sales.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you. I know we'll come back because I have lots of questions for you, but
Sure.
we'll let the other presenters introduce themselves and then we'll come back and circle back. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. All right. I believe next we have Willie.
Yeah, hi everybody. Grateful to be with you. So I now run Fungi Ally, which is a mushroom business I co-founded back in 2013 with someone that I went to college with, and then another person who was in the Amherst community. After about 2015, I've been the sole owner. We're based right now in Turners Falls, and I'm currently in Columbia. I've changed the format of my farming and my business a lot, so I'm able to travel now. Most of my business is based in laptop, and a lot of what I do at this point is offer mushroom grow kits, spawn, and education. So kind of the journey from 2013 to here was we originally started. I was working on vegetable farms as an apprentice, and was like, wow, it's really hard to access land and buy land, and kind of started learning about mushrooms, and was like, oh, this is an amazing addition into a strong local focused food network. So, and it also didn't require land or anything. I was like, I can do this in my basement. That's amazing. So that's kind of how I got into mushrooms, and I started just growing in my basement, and then we added on another basement and then a barn. And Mohammed, I think it was similar to you, where it was like all of a sudden we were stretched out over 4 different locations, and it was just like so much back and forth. So in 2015, we applied for a mega grant and also ran a Kickstarter campaign. Which, the Kickstarter campaign to provide the matching funds for the mega grant. And it was a really good extra motivation for that Kickstarter campaign of like, hey, every dollar that you're donating, or, you know, we started selling our grow kits and stuff through that campaign is being matched by a grant. So with that money, we moved into our first warehouse. It's kind of like that's our able to pay the first month's rent and start building infrastructure. We built a lab and a grow room. This was the warehouse we moved into in Hadley. And the other thing that we started working on when we did this was research grants, farmer research grants through SARE. And at this point, I've received, I think, 5 or 6 different SARE research grants. And one of the things I really like about these grants in particular is that they're paying farmers for their time. So, you know, being able to try out new things, do education, work on new crops, and also be paid for it is a really big addition. And through FSA funding and also another funding source called the Lot of Loan Fund, it's only for people who have gone through the Stockbridge School of Agriculture. But if you've gone through Stockbridge School of Agriculture, they offer 0% interest loans. So through those two kind of low interest rate loans, we got access to capital and to buy infrastructure like mixing equipment, and we added tractor trailers onto the warehouse as grow rooms. And between 2015 and 2019, we got up to growing about 500 pounds of mushrooms a week, and distributing that through CSAs, distributors, farmers markets, you know, kind of all
avenues. In 2019, I realized that our online business had been growing a lot, and basically I can have a grow kit and grow the mushrooms and sell the mushrooms and get maybe $10 from that grow kit, or I can sell the grow kit directly to the consumer for, you know, $25 to $30. And I love farming, and at the end of the day, there's a certain level of like, well, I want to have a free life and make money, and that's an important aspect of you know, having a business. So switched out of food production and more into that kind of consumer focused sales. And what was actually amazing was that allowed me, I was growing a lot less mushrooms, but then I was starting to you know, grow chickens and pigs and corn and other things more on a community neighborhood level. Yeah, Peter and Kat, thanks for processing those chickens for me a couple of years ago. Appreciate it. So yeah, that was kind of our process with funding and accessing money. I think I got everything. Oh, the other grant that I've applied to and used several times is the Harold Grinspoon grant, which is a $2,500 infrastructure equipment kind of grant, and that's every year available for farmers, definitely in Western Mass and Berkshire. I don't know if they've expanded it yet. So all good options for funding. This was another grant that I received, the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, which maybe was kind of particular for mushrooms, but I think with any, you know, specialty crops like ginger or other things could be applicable. And I had no intentions of applying for this grant, but MDAR put out 2 calls for proposals. You know, they put out the initial call for proposal, and then they put out another one being like, does anyone want to like propose stuff? Which to me was like, okay, there's probably good odds that I can get this grant. So that was a big kind of flag of like, okay, great, just apply for this and see what happens. And the focus was increasing the awareness. It was about $45,000. A lot of that was in labor. Some was in materials and workshops and venues and bringing together other farmers as well. And the big intention of it was to kind of grow the general Massachusetts grown mushrooms, educating the public, bringing together the growers to talk about, challenges and pooling resources and how can we collaborate in this field. So it was an interesting grant and felt productive. I've definitely found in doing several grants that the place I like to put the most amount of money in a budget is in labor. Generally, they can take longer than I typically expect. Labor is the part where the farmer, the person that applied for the grant, is getting paid. So a couple of tips that I just have for writing grants. The biggest one is what is the organization trying to do? So whenever I'm at the SARE applying for a SARE grant, I go back to what's their mission statement? What do they want to see happen in the world? And using that same sort of language in the proposal, just to kind of signal that there's an alignment between the applicant and the people that are giving out the grants. And using a similar language in the request for proposals as you put into the proposal, kind of matching that language is really helpful. I also think it's great to apply to the same grant 2-3 years. Sometimes you don't get it the first year or the second year, and I think it's great. You just take in the feedback and then make it better for the next year. So don't be discouraged if you don't receive a grant. The biggest grant that I've gotten, it took me 3 years to get, and then it was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm ready to do this work. And it's also really clear what I'm doing because it's been honed over those years. Super helpful to have someone edit your grant writing. That just brings the level of professionality to it. And then kind of what's the impact, making sure that the impact again is in alignment with the request for proposal and sufficient for that grant. A couple of challenges that I find in grants, probably the biggest is record keeping. So like writing reports of what happened months or years ago is really, really hard. So having the discipline to like just write hours and what's going on these monthly is super helpful. Also, estimating time and budget can be difficult. It's always good to go higher than what you think you might need. Like Mohammed was speaking to, cash flow can be a thing, waiting to get paid and just bridging that gap. I think that's an awesome idea of going to FSA to get a loan. So that's a great way to kind of minimize that impact. And then the other thing is coordinating with collaborators. It's interesting because a lot of times, if you're the one reporting for the grant, you're the one that really needs to make sure, what's going on, what people are collecting and the data they're collecting and what's going on is done properly. So kind of checking in and taking that responsibility of like, okay, I know my name is going to be on this work, and in the end, I'm the one that's going to have to be reporting. So that's another important aspect to kind of completing the grant. All right, thanks. That's all I've got to say at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much, Willie. Appreciate it. And good to know you've transitioned into a different business model, but are still getting the word out and connecting people with the love of mushrooms. All right. Next, we'll be hearing from Ellie Vaughn, owner of Phoenix Fruit Farm. So you're up, Ellie.
Hello. Yeah. I apologize. I did not make a slideshow. I guess I didn't get the memo that I was supposed to do that, so that's my bad, but I can still just talk through the points in the outline. So my name is Ellie Vaughn. I'm the owner of Phoenix Fruit Farm in Belchertown. I have 104 acres of land with about 35 acres currently planted, mostly in orchards. I have apples, peaches, some nectarines and grapes and pears and strawberries, just like some diverse fruit. And I do pick your own on the peaches and apples and occasionally on strawberries. I started the business in 2017, and I was previously managing this farm for Atkins. And before that, I was working at Red Fire Farm for like 7 years as a manager. I also went to UMass for plant and soil science and got a degree there. And I'm actually back in grad school right now working on an advanced degree in plant and soil science. So I guess when I first started, the enterprises I had were I was selling wholesale, mainly to Big Y. I also was doing several farmers markets in Holyoke, Springfield, Belchertown. In 2019, I started a retail store around the corner on this other property that I had purchased that has warehouses and cold storage that had also belonged to Atkins. And I'll talk a little bit about that because that was a challenging financial move to buy the farm and then buy the warehouse. And now I'm actually selling that warehouse property. So I ran the store there for 2.5 years and then ran into some pretty bad back problems. Much like Farmer Dave, I am very familiar with the 100-hour work week as a farm owner, and I have mixed feelings about that. You know, it seems like a lot of farmers, you know, are proud, and I am too, you know, of working that hard, but I don't think we should expect that from people, especially when they're not paying themselves anything. And I really would like to see a shift in our society towards like not expecting farmers to donate, you know, hard labor, 100 hours a week to grow food for a community. It's great to be that passionate about farming, but communities need food, and we shouldn't be relying on farmers to make that sacrifice to make that food available to people. But I'm digressing at this point. But I'm familiar with that, and that leads into what happened with my body. My back went out. I was just ignoring, you know, I was working 100 hours a week. I was just eating a lot of like takeout and convenience foods and like not drinking enough water, not taking enough breaks, not stretching, not doing restorative, you know, body work or anything like that, and for years. And I got to a point where I was so messed up that I had severe muscle spasms running up my back into my neck, and I couldn't turn my head. I was so weak in my arms from this that I couldn't grip a steering wheel, left-handed, so my left side was really bad, and I got to a point where I couldn't drive anymore. I was trying to run deliveries to Big Y in this old box, you know, stick shift box truck from 1991, and the back door was a beast. You had to like really just wang on it to get it to move, and I couldn't close. I delivered to Big Y one day and I could not get that door shut. And that was when I realized like I have got to change the way I'm doing this business, because I was just stopped in my tracks. I was severely disabled and I wasn't admitting it to myself. So when that happened, I closed the store because it had been losing money the whole time it had been open. And if I had kept going with it, it probably would have optimized. It was on a trajectory to start to make a modest profit in like another year, but it was too much on my plate. You know, I was trying to run a 100-acre farm by myself, and also the store at the same time, and that's just not very viable for a human being, as it turns out. So I took it off my plate. It wasn't working out for me. I never got into it to be a retail business person. I'm a farmer. I want to be out in the field. That's what feeds my spirit. So I made some decisions then and I should talk about how I bought the farm before I took out an FSA joint finance loan with FSA and Farm Credit Ease. So that's how I bought the farm. And then when the warehouse came along, I had a family member who was able to co-sign a loan with me. So I want to admit up to that privilege. So now you know how I obtained these properties. So there's a lot of debt. So I guess, you know, in terms of like the decisions that I had to make at that time, my business wasn't making money anyway, and I really made these decisions based on my health. So I am now only doing pick your own. I'm not doing any more farmers markets. I don't have any employees anymore. I used to have 11, and now it's just me, my fiance, and my neighbor, and some other grad students occasionally, which is really cool. Once in a while, I'll get some help from this university because I'm a student, but and I'm doing research up here now. Um, but I couldn't make it work financially. You know, it's something that I feel a lot of shame around, you know, feeling like I'm not a successful business owner because I never could make farming be profitable for me. But I don't think that economic success is the only measure of success in farming. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm a little bit anti-capitalist in the sense that I don't think that farms should be expected to be an economically viable business. It should be seen as a social service and a human right, like the post office or, you know, like other social safety nets that we have. It's the most essential human need is to eat. And we know that when people have access to fresh, local, healthy food, children do better in school, people are more productive in the workplace, we have less people in the hospital. It's better for our society. So I am of the belief that farms should be businesses that are supported, not regulated, but supported by the Fed, because it is best, it's better for everyone. So I might be a little bit of a radical here, you know, as like I'm not gonna tell you that I had this wonderful economic success story because I'm still struggling to find a way to farm, which is my passion. You know, I came into this not because I am a big, you know, business like minded person, but because I believe in feeding people and serving a community. And you know, I'm back in school right now trying to find some pesticide-free solutions for apples, which is a big challenge. One of the things I spent the most money on was chemicals. And I actually had a line of credit through Nutrient Ag to buy, you know, pesticides and fertilizers. And that was one way that I did help to cash flow my business. So, you know, they don't just sell, you know, conventional chemicals, they also sell fertilizers, organic products. Um, oh, thanks, Darren. I see your comment. Appreciate that. Because sometimes, you know, I tell people I don't use pesticides and I'm anti-capitalist, and they're like, whoa, like it's a bit much. So just throwing that right out there. But I guess I don't want to go too far out in the weeds with like my philosophies on like farms as economic models, but I will talk about what the attempts I've made to fund my farm. You know, I worked over 100 hours a week, and I did have some help from my family in terms of getting loans signed. And actually, one thing that helped me was buying that warehouse. I mean, this is really morbid, but I bought that warehouse right before the COVID pandemic, and so it has increased in value significantly just because of inflation since all of the last few years, which was just dumb luck, you know, and that's how it goes sometimes with real estate. You know, you hit it just right and you just get money you didn't really earn or deserve. So that's like interesting. But there's that. I I have found that pick your own has been one of my best income streams because I don't have to have the overhead of owning a whole packing house and managing a crew to, you know, harvest, pack, process, deliver that food. Um, I I of course, you know, dealing with the public has its own set of challenges, but overall, as long as there's somebody there, you know, and the rules are clear, people are pretty good, you know, and especially when, you know, they are there because they care about local farms, they're less likely to just, you know, do disrespectful things on your property. So my pick your own is much smaller than say like Tugis Orchard out in Eastern Mass, you know, where it's like you go there and it's like you're in Disney World or something, or like Six Flags. It's like this big, huge thing. I have a much smaller system now in my um so it's easier to control, I guess. But overall, I find that pick your own is much easier to deal with just in terms of like not needing as much staff and infrastructure and still getting that full retail value for something that I didn't have to pick and pack. And in my farm, because I'm pesticide free, my apples all have spots on them, so I'm very transparent about my marketing I think that's really important. I put up lots of pictures of my, spotty fruit. Oh, actually, I do have a slide that I've got a few pictures. Can I share my screen? Is that possible for me to do? All right,
Yes, you can share your screen.
great. Here we go. All right. Well, I'm just gonna show you some pictures of what apples look. Can you see this? So there's on the left, these are Spencer apples that have some scab. People were paying full price for these apples. They didn't have a drop of pesticides on them. And of course, it was an unusually dry season, so apple scab pressure was lower than it would have been, if it had been raining regularly. And also, it's my first year pesticide free, so I haven't built up, the inoculum in the orchard yet. But we had, this is the stuff that I marketed to customers, and people were coming to my farm from like 2 hours away to buy this fruit because it's just so hard to find, pesticide-free apples. On the right, there's apples with multiple plum curculio stings. That's another major pest that we use a lot of insecticides for, but they actually promote fruit thinning, which is something we spray PGRs on our trees. So we spray insecticides to kill the plum curculio, and then we spray PGRs to thin the fruit, which is something that the plum curculio would have done if we had just let them exist in our system. And the damage they leave is purely cosmetic. You can cut that off. There's no worm in that. The plum curculio doesn't survive in the fruit that stays on the tree. They only survive in the fruitlets that drop to the orchard floor. So you're not going to find a worm in there. It's just, a little scab on the outside of the skin that you can just cut off with a knife. So something that one of my approach to like becoming economically viable at this point is I'm considering turning this into a research farm. I'm already conducting research here. I might like get under the wing of a nonprofit or something and do work to do research in polycultural perennial systems in with the goal of eliminating the need for pesticides in tree fruit. And since I've started doing this work, my economic situation has improved. Since I have stopped having employees and trying to do wholesale, I'm actually economically in a better place now, and my quality of life is higher, and I'm working way less. And also now that I'm not using pesticides, I have all these amazing, I gotta get more pictures, but I've got these amazing like populations of native sweat bees, like the little blue, like I'd never seen them up here before until I stopped spraying pesticides, and hummingbirds, and like, oh my goodness, just like the biodiversity has just exploded up here, and it's super inspiring. And I make that more of a priority than my economics. So I think I'm an outlier. Like I can't allow economic modeling to dictate my growing practices and my philosophies and the way that I run this business. So I don't know. I guess and I should talk about the grants that I've gotten. I've gotten several grants from MDAR, and one of them was the acre grant, which I used to get FRP up in my cold storage building for food safety regs back when I was doing wholesale. And that was a challenge because it was like $75,000 and I had to pay it all up front. And then I got paid back like 50-some thousand. So, what David was saying is true, that like you end up ultimately getting this great value of some infrastructure that holds its value, but being able to cash flow that, I don't think that farmers should have to do that. Quite frankly, they're struggling financially, and expecting a farmer to go and get a loan from FSA to, get this grant to improve their infrastructure that is going to enhance the food system for everybody, not just for them, doesn't seem fair to me. But I got that grant. I've also gotten the AEEP grant, which was the Ag Energy Efficiency Program. I got an irrigation system with that grant. That was a good one. It was also like a 15-20% match. And I was able to get irrigation on my new young peach trees. I got the AFSIP grant, which was the Ag Food Safety. I think they rolled that in with something else since then, but that was for some packing line equipment. Again, food safety related. I I did do the mega grant that Mohammed was talking about earlier for some pick your own signage. They got the Sarah grant twice for land clearing. That's an APR related grant. And I think the state grants are great. The applications are really user friendly. I just wish that we didn't have to bankroll the whole thing, because there's definitely been years that I've been like, I have this infrastructure project idea, I really want to do this grant. I cannot cash flow that. There's no way. And that's really unfortunate. And I think in a country where we can give, the Fed just hands over billions of dollars to bail out banks and Wall Street with no strings attached, no reimbursement, no receipts, no interference, no specific, you can use it for this project, but not for this project, but they can't do something for farmers. Just, I don't know, man. I don't know. So I don't want to take any more. I think I might be over time, but I'll leave it at that unless anyone has any questions.
Great, thanks, Ellie. We're going to come back to Q&A after we hear from our last speaker. So hold tight. I'm sure folks will have some good questions for you. So thank you for sharing. And next up, we have Kat and Peter.
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Let's see. Let's share. I did make some slides. Presentation here. My computer is lagging a little. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yep, looks good.
Great. So we're Kat and Peter, who read Farm in Sunderland. And our presentation is so big on our computer and everyone's faces are so small. I like seeing people's faces when I'm trying to talk about something. So Kat and Peter, we are a small-scale pasture poultry farm. We are year-round, so the pasture has a little asterisk. We pasture as season allows. We do have winter housing, which we can get into more. We do year-round wholesale poultry. We operate a on-site small enterprise state-inspected processing facility, and we are moving towards getting a USDA grant of inspection. And we have some funding that helped us with that, which we'll talk about. We offer full service custom poultry processing for our local poultry producers. There are not many in the state or in general at this sort of scale. And we're really invested in education and outreach. We are looking into getting into more consulting. We offer workshops, tours. We speak at events like this. And we are located in Sunderland. One's occupied by Nipmuc, Wabanaki Confederacy, and the Pacomitan. So our enterprises, as I said, is poultry. Most of it is wholesale, but we do some direct to consumer. We have our processing facility. A little bit of fiber and art. I have a small flock of fiber sheep that are my little passion project on our farm. And I do some education outreach with that as well, with the Livestock Conservancy and speaking with a group of BIPOC fiber farmers. We do panels at Rhinebeck and such. We are working on implementing a compost program on our farm. We had a grant help us with that as well. And again, education outreach is something I'm personally really passionate about. And I think it's so important in terms of where food comes from, local food systems in general, and fellow farmers. How do we do all this? It's sometimes very mysterious, and sometimes it's just luck, right? Like we've noticed a trend. How we started, Peter ran a mobile poultry processing unit. As Jennifer mentioned, she mentioned you met years ago, right?
yeah. Like a decade ago. I ran it for a year and it just didn't work.
There were a lot of, with poultry processing, there's a lot of regulatory issues, but with a mobile processing unit, he ran into just so many regulatory and logistical issues. Moving that unit from place to place is kind of starting over every time at each site. So he decided the way to go is stationary. And he found APR land in Sunderland, where we are currently located. And you got that in 2018. And on that land, there was just a Morton building, which you can see a picture of here. And he put a plant in a box in the building. Plant in a box was created by David Schaefer. You can see them in the bottom right. David Schaefer is of Featherman Equipment. He actually brought Joel Salatin a couple of years ago to come check it out. So that was really cool. And as you'll see in our future slides, in our slides coming up, that this processing facility is now what we call the heart of our facility. So the specs for this were always intended to be like ready to go USDA, right?
Yeah.
So it's capable of doing those numbers. It's for us to grow into. So a lot of our planning is about that sort of foresight. And then this is a quick slide. Well, not quick. This is like the bulk of our slides. This is our funding. So for a long time, we both worked full time and had off-farm incomes. In addition to, we had other part-time jobs as well. You were doing what, 100+ hours? Also, another trend I've noticed in all our speakers today, putting in a lot of hours. So there's some sweat equity in there. Peter was full-time up until 2021. And I was full-time. I went part-time for like half a year. And then I left that position last year because the farm it's really grown and I couldn't do both. We are grateful to have received some family loans, supportive family who were in the financial place to be able to help us get things started, like getting the land and the plant. And then pretty recently, we received federal and state grants. The Massachusetts Food Security Infrastructure Grant, which some people have already mentioned. We also got USDA grants, the Meat and Poultry Inspection Readiness Grant, specifically for our processing plant. I don't know how applicable that is to everybody, but there are USDA grants out there for different agricultural purposes. And then a few other grants, awards, and technical assistance that we've received from CISA, Berkshire Agricultural Ventures. We received a New England Farmer Microgrant from American Farmland Trust, which I think Willie mentioned earlier. Someone mentioned that earlier. No, Mohammed mentioned that earlier. That cap has actually just gone up from 5,000 to 10,000. So folks should really apply for that if you're in the eligible area.
No match.
Oh, the other big thing about that is it's no match. So people have been talking about a big thing about grants, because a lot of them are reimbursement based. So you have to pay for it up front and then you get reimbursed. And sometimes that can take a while. So that cash flow balancing is really tricky. And then some of these grants have match. You have to pay 20% of it or 40% of it or whatever it is. So getting an award that has no match, they're just sending you money, that's pretty nice. And it's rare, so. And then I wanted to do just some quick photos for the example of what one of our grants accomplished. This was the first food security infrastructure grant, and it added the supportive infrastructure for our plant. So our plant is capable of processing a lot of poultry. What we didn't have is cold storage and space for packing and et cetera. So you can see our existing Morton building there on the left, and then almost a year later, you can see our additions. That white extension there is a walk-in cooler and a walk-in freezer. And then this is the inside of the plant. So you had seen the picture of the plant in the beginning. It was this shipping container, just sort of put in there. And with these, all these beams are exposed. So then after the grant, we were able to put in all this, what kind of sheeting is it again?
Metal liner panels.
Metal liner panels, and that it's all going towards with the intention of USDA. So this is all food safe surfacing and a new garage door. And so you see the plant has we've grown everything around the plant, and the plant is now integrated into the building. You can see we also, my favorite, we added bathrooms, which is great. We were using porta potties for like 2 years, winter, summer. It's not fun. So my favorite was the bathrooms from this grant, which you can see in that the metal, it's kind of juts out towards the plant. It's a little hard to see, but these pictures are from the same perspective.
The floor is teal now.
Oh, yeah. So these pictures don't show, it currently has a nice teal floor. It's special urethane epoxy coating, also to go towards USDA because you can't have cracks in the flooring. And that was thanks to one of the USDA grants I mentioned. And you can even see in these photos on the left, there's all that like ice on the ground. We have insulation in the building now too, and that helps a ton with our safety and just maintaining everything, keeping control over the environment for the food that we're creating. And then this is from the other position. You can see the wall that we punched out to make the doors into the new walk-in cooler and freezer. And you can also see the chef freezers. We used to have a lot of those. That's what we used to store the poultry in. And it's not fun digging through all those. You kind of compromise the packaging while you're shuffling everything around. And so the new walk-in freezer has been a game changer for us. And then these are shots into our walk-in cooler and our walk-in freezer. They look different now because we put in the floor, like I mentioned, not in the freezer. The freezer has a lot more in it, and it's more organized. You can see our vacuum chamber sealer. Anything else from this one?
No.
Oh, those are the old scales. We got new, really nice Mettler Toledo scales from one of the USDA grants, and that was really nice. So we got some upgrades.
And all our packaging and cutting up is done under refrigeration. So once all our chicken's processed under cold storage, so the cold chain is really good.
The chicken is never really out, right? It goes from chilling to this big walk-in cooler where we have the space to pack it all under refrigeration. And we actually have we're starting a new walk-in cooler, which will be attached to the existing one, and that will be a dedicated storage, dedicated cold storage, which is a requirement for USDA. And so then we'll have even more space, which is great. Chicken, you need to keep cold. It's important. And then I threw together some grant challenges and tips, which is pretty much an echo of what everyone has already said. Like I mentioned, a lot of grants are reimbursement based, so you have to really keep that in mind. What are you capable of balancing? So you need to not only plan for the cash flow and what you can manage, but if you get awarded the grant, monitoring it is a constant. You always need to keep that in mind. While applying for grants, some things I found really helpful. I guess I should have moved the choosing grants and projects to the top, is kind of keep an eye out on the grant landscape. What grants are out there? What will they cover? What does your farm need? So just like a quick example, because we knew we were going for the USDA grant specifically for poultry processing, with meat and poultry processing, I knew that the processing equipment upgrades that we needed to go on that grant. And I didn't need to use the food security infrastructure grant for that. So in that way, we kind of target what we're trying to get from which grant. Review those requirements early on, especially federal programs. I don't think anyone's talked about federal grants yet, but it's a really complex system because you need like multiple different logins for different websites, and government websites are not always user-friendly. So sometimes you need to have an account set up, you need to get things approved before you can even apply. So I really recommend starting that early. Ask for your letters of support in advance. It's rude not to. You want people to not only be able to write that letter, but you also want to have time for them to maybe miss that they were going to get to you the letter by a certain day. And then you can ask them, hey, remember that letter? Do you have it? Do you need more information? And then they can say, oh, right, here's your letter. And you can still have it in time for submitting. Someone else also mentioned expect delays and expect cost increases. It is inevitable. Not a lot of things are inevitable, but that is. So you want to think about that when you're building your proposal and your budget. And thinking about the grant program's goals. What are they trying to accomplish and how does your farm do that? That's what they want you to answer. And just a couple little things that I try to keep in mind is when you reread your proposal, think about what question they might think of and then try to preemptively answer those. Quantify things if you can be tough when you're just making projections, but I think that helps to give them a context of what you're trying to accomplish with the funds that you're asking for. And then, yeah, the difficulties of the grant life cycle and reporting, making sure you keep track of the things you said you were going to do and giving them the reports that they want. And I find it helpful to be really friendly with your point of contact. You're one of many people who have grants, and it's a very frustrating process. And And I imagine that their jobs are probably really hard and they probably have lots of people yelling at them. So I find it's nice to you know, be friendly and understanding and try to be anticipate the thing that you might need so that you can ask for it early on. I think that pretty much covers everything. You want to show? We do have, if we have a little bit of time, I don't know what time it is. We do have a few pictures of our newest building. I didn't put them in the presentation itself, but I thought it might be cool for people to see what we've done with our second food security infrastructure grant. Building this. This is our outbuilding for our winter housing. And you can see we've started growing some chickens in it, and they're doing wonderfully compared to last year in the hoop houses. It has made a huge difference for our production. The building we asked for is, you can kind of see it's kind of just a big box, and that's on purpose because we wanted it to have a lot of versatility. It's sort of modular in a way. You can see that we can adapt it to our needs. Something that we were talking about earlier is, you know, there's always a surprise. So as things change, we can adapt accordingly. That's the big thing about that building. And that's pretty much it. I hope I covered everything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was great. I'm so excited to see all the growth that you've had and all the investments that you've been able to make in your processing facility. That's great. I want to come visit. So
Please
thank you. Awesome. So now we're going to open it up to questions and answers from all of you in the audience. We had a couple in the chat already. Just maybe a quick one from everybody. One of the questions is like, who do you ask for letters of support from if you're supposed to include those in your grant? So maybe some of you guys could share some suggestions around letters of support.
Well, I threw it in the chat, but I got one time when I was applying for a packing house, the FSIG grant. I didn't end up getting the grant, but the town administrator wrote me a letter of support. So maybe like, you know, influential, you know, municipal people, or if you know, like a state rep or something like that, who would be willing to do that. I don't know.
I've asked for letters from CETA and Berkshire Ag Ventures because they sort of give like an overview, a context of the role you play in the state or in the area. And then I guess I base it on what the grant is asking for. If they're asking for people to make an impact on food security, then you talk to the people that you work with, that you have relationships with, and you both work on those goals together.
Yes, sometime I got letter from Jennifer Hestley. It's basically depending on like what the project is. If you have collaboration or if you sell produce to a food hub or any other big organization that is directly linked to what the project is asking for. It could be, also I got letters from town because they were asking, what is your land security? Most of the grants, they require you to have at least 3 or more years of, land security. People like us who is leasing or renting lands, that is something you need to think about. In that case, probably the town or other officials can be, important that they are supporting your mission, for the money you are asking for. So, yeah, you can basically list all the people. Particularly, you need to remember that person or the organization need to have really, really good understanding what you are doing, what is the mission, and is it really, linking with the grant.
Great. Thank you. And Joe had a question earlier about marketing, and just wondering, you all talked about kind of your growth of your business and changing marketing strategies, as you've developed. So it was kind of, his questions was around, how long was the marketing survey to select your customer base? And can you give a general sense of the cost or scale of sort of how you found your markets and grown your businesses, or did you do it by word of mouth? So I think all of you could probably speak to that.
Yeah, I can go first just really quickly. That made me want to mention that through CISA, I got technical assistance with Myrna Greenfield of Good Egg Marketing Consulting to help me develop my farm store plan. So like, a CISA membership is like 100, they have a sliding scale, but it's like $90 to $200 or whatnot, but you can get thousands of dollars worth of technical assistance through them. So it's a really, really good deal.
Or your buy local group, whichever one's closest to you. If you have one, I think someone was out of state, so they might not have a buy local group.
There's one in Rhode Island. I think like several states have something similar to CISA.
Referring back to the survey, especially in the first 5 years of our CSA, we would survey with a Survey Monkey, the CSA membership every single year. In some cases, multiple times a year at the ends of different seasons, just asking 20 different questions just to get a good sense of what the customers were thinking. Because, vocal customers are vocal customers, but you really want to know what the majority feels. And so that would help us guide which direction to push our production towards, would actually list 40 different crops or 50 different crops and have them rate each crop. Do you want more or less or the same? And if you get 200 people responding, you had a pretty good sense of what people wanted more of versus less of, rather than just relying on the loudest people's voices.
Great. Any other marketing tips? I know I see in the chat, someone asked Kat where you'll be selling the chickens that you process and raise, and you responded that you're going to wholesale them to institutions, grocery stores, farm stores, and restaurants. So are there other questions folks have about grant writing, marketing? Heather's got a question in the chat. Where's the best place to advertise fields or woods for lease? She's a Farm Bureau member and placed a classified ad, but it didn't generate any leads.
I believe Land for Good has that directory. Am I correct on that, Jennifer?
Yes. Yep. So Land for Good definitely has the New England Farmland Finder, which is an online marketplace for posting land leasing. I'm not sure if you tried working with them, but I would say too, maybe reaching out to the NOFA, Massachusetts, Land for Good, some of the other, maybe even MDAR, if they're willing to make announcements in the Farm and Market Report. And there's the online marketplace that MDAR also manages, where people can post things available for sale or job positions and all of that. So those might be some folks or places to think about. Well, I have a question. If other folks, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you're welcome to put something in the chat. But I'm just wondering, you guys all seem like you've had great experience with grant writing, and I liked what Willie said, which is, sometimes you have to try multiple times. I write lots of grants, and sometimes it takes many, many times. You don't always win them the first time around. So what resources did all of you use to help with your grant writing? Did you take a class? Did you just read the instructions and write something and try it out? Or what other resources did you use to feel more confident and comfortable with grant writing?
I had some, not grant writing experience specifically, but in my work as an academic administrative type person, I did a lot of grant budgeting and sort of the grant world, getting applications through and things like that. So I had that helping me out, and CISA was huge for us. They helped us with looking grants over and providing some suggestions for feedback. And then I rolled from there. And as Willie was saying, every time I write another grant, it's another opportunity to step back and look at what we're doing and how to explain that to somebody else and the importance of it.
And I just want to add that I agree everything Kat said. I also have used CISA, and also sometimes if you look at a grant, you know, like there's a certain time of year that different grant programs will come out, and while the RFR, you know, the request for response or whatever they call it is out, and you're supposed to apply for it during that period. A lot of grants you can't ask the grant officer any questions while the grant is out, but a lot of times before the grant has come out for, you know, the application has become open, you can actually like talk to the grant officer and ask them questions, tell them about your idea, see if what they think, pick their brain about it. So that's always worth looking into, just to give it a try and see if you can get, you know, an idea of whether they think your project is a good fit.
I'll also add that non-farming friends have been really great. I'll ask them to read it over. You don't know who the reviewers are going to be for the grant, so it's nice to have a non-agricultural perspective on like things that you may not have realized were confusing or that you need to elaborate on.
I would second that, Kat. I always try to have somebody read over my grant that is not on the farm, because you don't know who the reader and reviewer of the grant is going to be. So what background are they coming into it with? So you want somebody totally disassociated to just do a quick review, and that might, you know, encourage you to rewrite some segments with a little bit more explanation to make sure that the reader fully understands what you're proposing and why they should support that application.
In my case, I host. I'm one of the host for woofers. I know everyone, most of you are familiar with. So sometimes I get woofers from different backgrounds, from business, accounting. I never turn them out. I say, you know, farming, growing is, I feel relatively easy. But marketing and grant writing, those are most difficult tasks for the farmer. So I found success from few of the people who came as a woofer to help on my farm. Then I found out their background is, you know, they are from business school. They are real accountant. I have woofer who is a designer and market development. So I got help quite a bit from them because I didn't have any grant writing experience, particularly in agriculture. My background is in science, so it is quite different than what I am doing. So it was helpful. And also, if you are in a farming school or farming program, they might come really, really handy. In my case, new entry, I got help from new entry in many occasions, you know, checking the application, getting tips and helps, and that really helped me a lot.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Daniela.
I have kind of a follow-up question to Mohammed, talking about writing grants on leased land, because I just signed a lease and the owners are great, and I've shown them like what I want to add to the land, and they seem on board, but I was kind of just wondering how being on leased land has influenced, or if it has, the grants that you pursue or can pursue, and kind of how that dynamic is between you and the landowner during the grant process and then during the implementation and financing.
Great. This is really a great question. I had a great struggle and frustration at the same time. At the beginning, because I was leasing the land from the town, and the town lease is actually for 5 years. So I entered through the lease, I think it was second year. So I mean, broken year. So I was not getting the lease for 5 years. So it is basically year to year at the beginning when I entered into the town system. At that time, I applied for NRCS grant and also for the mega grant. But both of the grant was requiring that I need to have at least 3 years lease. And the town they do not even call lease, they call it license. So there are so many things that, both parties are government parties. One is state or federal, then the town. But they seems like do not talk to each other very well for some reason. It was frustrating to me. But the town of Lincoln, they were really, really supportive. They wrote me a letter that due to the difficulty, they cannot tell that I own the land for next 3 years. So they explained in a big letter that what is the situation. And they assured that if I do not, break the rules, if I do not do weird stuff on the property, I can be there. So that letter really helped me to navigate the process. Otherwise, technically, MDR or NRCS, they would not fund me. So I think there things need to be improved within the government system. I mean, as Ellie mentioned, it's a struggle, but I think we need to improve the situation here. But if your landlord is really, really positive, then a letter from your landlord explaining, what is the lease situation, I think most departments should understand, and I think you can get through this.
Thank you.
Danielle, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that. I think kind of seconding a little bit what Mohammed was mentioning, make sure you have very open communication between the landlords and the grant funders, and try to get out of the grant funders what time frame they're looking for in the length of a lease. I mean, some might just need a 1 year, some might want a 5 year, some might in their rating process give more value to a 10-year lease rather than a 5-year lease. So that would be good information to have before you start to enter into it. I don't know if it's with a public entity or not, but I ran into an issue with an orchard that I operate that's town owned, and I get funding from FSA for a well for irrigation. And then, the person initially at the town was all in favor of it because it's an improvement to town-owned property. However, then we got into the nitty-gritty, and then questions started to be asked, which in some cases couldn't clearly be answered. Was the well driller paying prevailing wages to all staff or not? Originally, the funding was going to go through me as the operator, but the town preferred it to go through them because it would be a capital investment into the town. But that's not the way the FSA had set it up, and I'm not sure if they would have even considered setting it up like that. So again, having full and clear communications from the get-go is, I would say, critical to make sure it succeeds.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is private landowners in Portland, Maine. And like they just they're at my age and inherited this great farm, but aren't farmers. And a barn really needs, it's like an old horse stable that I hope to make a post-harvest station. So it's like a lot of kind of construction and renovations in there. And so I'm wondering, like how involved the landowners need to be with the grant providers if the funding is going to go through.
Yeah, another
The joint.
big question is, are these going to be leasehold improvements, is it improvements to the land itself, or is it more of a wash station that you could take with you should you leave the property? I think that's a big deciding factor here as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And Daniela, we can help connect you. I don't know if you're already connected to the Conservation Law Foundation's Legal Food Hub, but that might be something to tap into. And for other folks on the phone, if you need, if you're an income qualified farmer or a nonprofit organization, you can tap into the Legal Food Hub's pro bono attorney network to help you both craft a really solid lease arrangement that's beneficial to you as the leaseor. And you could probably identify some of those issues that you're already thinking about to make sure that it's really clear, so that whatever investment you make, you'll be whole in the lease, so that you're protected for your investments. And yeah, that can be helpful also, I think, to, when the funder wants to make sure you have land security, that some of those provisions are also spelled out about what's going to happen to the disposition of those assets if the lease should terminate at some point.
Okay, thank you. And sorry,
Great.
one last quick question. Is the mega grant a Massachusetts state grant, or is it a federal grant?
State, right?
It's state through the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Jess Camp is here from MDAR, who runs the mega program. Who could speak to that in just a second, but I did want to get to Cliff's question about veteran resources. So do you want to ask your question, Cliff?
Yes, thank you. So I am a part-time organic farmer here in the state of New Jersey, a member of NOFA, New Jersey, and I've been working with Devin. I've got an outreach mission that to form a veterans outreach program in the state of New Jersey to assist newly separated and any veterans who are interested in organic farming. We're just at the beginning stages of this process. And I am brand new to the receiving end of grants, and that's something I'm in the process of starting to look at. This is not for my farm, but I'll put my email address in the chat. So if anybody has experience with grant providers that favor veterans for something like this initiative that we're looking to do, I would be much appreciative of that. I have reached out to Agribility, and they've given me some info, and I have a call next week with New Jersey Department of Ag and someone who's done some work with some veterans. But I wanted to throw that question out there, since you all are all seasoned grant writers and recipients. Thank you.
Great. Are any of you speakers veterans as well? I never know who has served in the military or not. No. But there are definitely, to your question, Cliff, it's a good one. There are different programs within USDA that are favorable to veterans, that do have set aside, funding specifically targeted to veterans. There's also the Ag Vets training program for nonprofits that want to specifically work with returning military veterans to help them with training in agriculture. So I'll find that link and drop that in the chat for you too. The request for proposals for 2023 has not dropped yet, but it will be coming out in the spring. So yeah, there's a veteran outreach program, and the USDA 2501 program, which is called the Outreach and Assistance to Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers and Veterans. That's also another grant program, again, more for outreach, training, and technical assistance. But the goal is to help connect military veterans and other underserved farmers with USDA programs and resources. So happy to drop those in the chat for you too. And I like Leaf's suggestion of, reaching out to the Farmer Veteran Coalition, who knows all of those grants inside and out. So.
All right, thanks very much.
Yeah. And Jessica, did you want to say a few words about the MEGA program, which is the request for proposals is out right now, due May 1st. So for any of you Massachusetts farmer residents that are interested in learning more.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Jennifer, I'm Jessica. I just kind of wanted to say hello, and so glad that the request for response came out today. And it was really great to hear all the speakers talk about their experiences. They shared a lot of great advice for folks. I guess Jennifer shared earlier the link to the request for response for Mega and the link to the webinar that we'll be holding tomorrow, where we'll talk a little bit more in detail about the Mega program. But I just kind of wanted to be here and say hello, and then I can share my contact information in the chat and encourage anybody to reach out to me if you have questions about Mega now or in the future. I should say that that program is a viability program. As Mohammed mentioned, there's a business planning and technical assistance piece along with the grant program. That's one of the unique aspects of that program that makes it a little bit different than other programs. And it's also expanding in fiscal year 2024, this upcoming cycle. So it'll be for beginning farmers with 1 to 10 years in business. So we're now matching the USDA definition of a beginning farmer of 1 to 10 years in business.
Great. And that comes with lots of technical support and also requires a match and cash upfront. And all the things that we heard were a little bit of challenges from some of our speakers. So maybe Emdar heard all of that and you'll take that back, right?
Well, it does. And the one thing I want to say is that I've always thought that one of the opportunities of Mega is for beginning farmers. They are smaller awards for beginning farmers, and it is a 1-to-1 match and it's a reimbursement grant, but it comes along with business planning assistance. So it gives you the opportunity to think about how you're going to fund investments in infrastructure in your farm. Whether you can find grant funds for it or whether you have to just figure out how to make the business work on your own.
Great. Thank you. And I know you guys are always super open and willing to help folks through the process and support them afterwards if you can. So thank you all for doing that.
Thanks.
Great. So are there other questions that are coming through in the chat, or does anyone want to unmute and ask additional questions? Otherwise, I have a whole bunch of other questions. I can keep going, but I want to make sure that folks that are here get your questions answered. I guess one of the questions Darren is asking, maybe for the beginning farmer piece, for you, Jess, if for the 1 to 10 year range, how do you define year 1? Is that like pre-startup, or you already have a year of Schedule F income on your taxes for year 1?
Yeah, well, so one thing I want to say in general too is you always want to check the specific request for response for any program, because details can change from year to year. But in terms of Mega, the first year in business is what we count as year 1 as shown on tax forms.
Great. Thanks, Ellie, for joining us. I know you have to leave, so thanks for all your advice and contributions. So I guess I know many of you have mentioned some of the challenges in applying for funding. I guess if you could sum it up to say what's the biggest obstacle that you feel like you faced in applying for grants or funding, aside from putting all this time and energy and maybe not getting the grant? But are there any other challenges folks should be aware of as they're going into this process, or things that you've learned that you haven't already shared?
I would just second your thought of time. You have to allocate a good amount of time to apply for these grants. I've been also awarded USDA REAP grants, and that's forget what REAP stands for, Rural Energy for Agriculture Program, possibly. I think I use that for geothermal heating and cooling system, as well as a solar array. And I remember in one instance, it was like 100-page application. And yeah, first you had to get your DUNS number to basically, set up get yourself set up in the system. So it takes a lot of time to get some of these grants. And that's where, in some cases, if it's a smaller dollar amount, you start to say, it's a smaller dollar amount, and what are my chances of getting it? Is it worth putting in the time, or is my time better spent just farming? And that's where you kind of have to sit down and do a mini analysis on the back of a napkin, I suppose. So yeah, I think just having the time to get it done Obviously, the larger the dollar amount, the more time you want to invest in it.
I mean, I echo with Dave. Also, what I found really hard for me is most of the grant writing timeline is during the farming season, right at the beginning. And this is really hard for the farmers, I believe. And the other piece of that is we submit the grant, we get the approval, then only you have two months or so to finish the project. And then most of the grant, even they will not pay you for the labor. So that is a piece you need to keep in your mind that, oh, I got the grant. Who is going to build it within this time frame? You are racing through your season, CSA market, whatnot. Then you get to finish the project. Otherwise, all the investment, like time, energy, and money is gone. So that I found a bit frustrating. I'm not sure what can be done. I mean, this is a set system in our society, but I think that is something in government level, they need to really invest in it. The other piece I found really interesting and troubling at the same time. When I started, it was 2020 during the pandemic. When people are getting, $500 from the federal government to survive, I was spending my all earnings in basically farming the infrastructure. Thousands of dollars. It's not like $5,000 or $20,000. It's thousands of dollars I invested while people are getting, $100 or $500 from the federal government, and people are lining up for food 3 miles in Florida. We saw it, but somehow it feels me like it's really troubling. And I'm not sure why this is like reimbursement grant. Is it a trust issue? I don't know, but that feels me really, it was bothering me a lot. Like during the pandemic, while everybody is getting money from the federal government and someone is not trusting us that we will not do the project, then they will pay me. It seems like you are encouraging, somehow it is the encouragement for the people who have the money to get the money. So this piece, I'm still not buying on it, because then how a person can start a farm who does not really have money? He has invested all his energy, take courses from new entry or whatnot, then like FS will not give you the loan if you have a good credit history. Then you have to go to a different organization to get your loan. So you have to have a bad credit history to get the FS loan. That is also a different story. But you can get through it if you know the system a little better. But these are some of the frustrating thing. I felt in my journey. So I'm not sure if this something can be done, but I think it is not fair for the people who are growing food, and we cannot survive without food. And I have to work, 2 different jobs. I mean, full-time job, 40 hours a week. Then I have to do farming to, feed myself and the community. I mean, this is not fair at all. Anyways, thank you.
Are there other questions that folks have? I have a couple more. I know sometimes people wonder what the financial information that you have to pull together to apply for grants. So how do you pull together? I mean, are there pieces of information that you have to share with as you're developing your proposal application? How do you get contractors to actually give you quotes on time that are realistic? kind of pulling all those pieces together can be a challenge. So I'm wondering if you have any good suggestions or strategies for folks as they're trying to do that.
Allocate a lot of time in advance, is what I would say. A lot of the NRCS grants that I've gotten for farm improvements between, irrigation systems and things like that, they won't, or wells, they don't require quotes in advance, or at least they haven't. The downside is they have a set dollar amount that you're going to get reimbursed. And sometimes I find that, their dollar amounts that they're going to reimburse, while they say it might be 75% of the cost, really might only be 50%. In one case, it was going to come out to almost 25%. And I said, no, thanks. I'll not take the money because it's so little of a percentage, even though you think it's going to be 75%. The reality is it's only 25%. And that was to actually expand upon, and that was more because of the logistics of it that they were inflexible. So when you have to get the quotes, you especially in this post-COVID period, to get quotes from anybody, anything construction related, it's kind of like good luck. They're all busy. While nobody wants to turn away work, they oftentimes don't want to take the time to write up a quote if you're just going for a grant that you might get 9 months from now. So you kind of have to talk to them and convince them that it might be worthwhile. And I think the last food security infrastructure grant application, they actually preferred multiple quotes, which meant even more time investment. And again, you have to talk to those contractors, 3 to 4 weeks out, knowing that it's going to take them a little time to put together the numbers, and hope that they get it to you. Just like the letters of support, you have to keep nudging them. Hey, just a reminder, I need that quote. I need that quote. And then you hope you get multiple quotes to submit. And if you just end up getting one quote for a certain work, is that going to be sufficient for the grant reviewer? Is another question. So it's just time. And again, that's where you have to sit down and do that mental analysis of is it worth the time investment for the amount that you might get out of it? And if you're trying to sometimes I try to sit there and think, what's the percentage chance that I'm actually going to get awarded this grant? Is it 20%? Is it 80%? And sometimes like this really good application, if I can formulate it well, I think it's like 80% chance of getting funded. And sometimes I'm like, it's pie in the sky. That's probably only have a 25% chance of getting funded. And it's going to take me nearly 5 days of work to assemble it. I'll pass on that one. So again, there's always other work to be done on the farm. So you just have to do that analysis of your time investment.
You also have to look from the contractor's point of view. Do they want to spend the time to write up a quote for someone to apply for a grant that they may not get? You won't even find out if they get it or not till however many months down the line. So my recommendation is to ask your community. If you know someone who knows someone, that could help you get bumped up the priority list potentially for a contractor to give you a quote. But yeah, it's hard.
Great. Yeah, it's tough. So one, Darren had a general question. If you're just starting out and wondering if you should find an accountant that's familiar with the economics of farming to maybe help you make some of these decisions. Do any of you use an accountant that specializes in agricultural businesses?
We got a recommendation from CISA. So the accountant has worked with other farms, so that's why we worked with them, but we're pretty new, so I couldn't tell you other experiences.
It's a difficult question because in my area, there's not that many farms. So as a result, there's not that many accountants that are that familiar with agricultural economics. In my area, the one I would recommend would be First Pioneer Farm Credit. I'm sorry, Farm Credit East is their new name.
I was working with she's really an accountant, not related to agriculture, but she was very interested to learn our system. But the data that she needs to help to make those decisions, we don't have any organized data points to give it to her. So that was I think that is something people needs a really good data collection for what we are doing in marketing or the improvement that we are doing, labor that is needed. You really need to have a good understanding of your data structure so that someone can make the judgment call of what is, what investment you are making and what is the rate of return. So I echo with Dave. There is not really many help on that sector unless it is a corporation.
Mhm. Great. And Heather had a question about ag solar companies and which grants you might have used for solar energy support. I know some of you mentioned the kind of rural energy for agriculture program. Do any of you have experience with solar projects?
Yeah, I do. I've put up 3 different installations, 2 25 kilowatts and 1 10 kilowatt. And later this year, we're going to be putting up a 50 kilowatt system. I've used Revision Energy on all the projects. They've been very good to work with. But to a certain extent, I would say ag solar is the same as all solar. So you could probably use any company. Funding is USDA REAP in Massachusetts. I believe it's now falls under the CSAP, Climate Smart for Agriculture program. Mass CEC, if you Google that, they are very good at helping put in the energy related grant applications.
The CET?
CEC.
Do you want to put that link in the chat? If you can. That'd be great. And Mohammed, did you say you got funding for an ag solar project as well?
That is basically it was part of the NRCS high tunnel project. So it was included with the irrigation and the solar. So yeah, it is not the whole cost, but it covers most of the cost.
The other big factor on solar now is the tax credits you can get for it, which I believe was 26%, and I believe it's going up to 30% this year. And the nice thing about it is if you don't have enough income or profit, you can roll it forward several years until you use it up.
So that's good.
Great. Well, we're just about at time. So unless there are other questions, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Kimberly, and other students that are on the New Entry team who've helped pull this series together and get all the speakers lined up. And thank you so much to Mohammed and Dave and Kat and Peter, and to Willie and Ellie who had to leave. Thanks to all of you for sharing your knowledge and experience and for the hard work that you do every day to steward the land and grow food for the community and be the role models that we like to look up to in the farming community, folks that are actually doing it and rolling up their sleeves, and to all the other farmers who attended tonight to learn and hopefully will be motivated and inspired to go off and pursue your own grants and resources to continue to invest in your farm. So thank you all so much. Thanks to our funder for funding this workshop series. Thanks to the farmers who inspired the idea for this workshop series. And I hope that you all fill out the final poll as you exit and the evaluation that we send to you as a follow-up after the workshop session. So thanks again to all of
Thank
you,
you so
and
much.
I hope you have a good rest of your evening.